I welcome you all to this panel talk on climate resilient infrastructure planning in Pakistan. So before we begin, I'd just like to give a brief overview of the SEED program. Sustainable Energy and Economic Development Program is a £15 million UK aid funded project for the government of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. The program has been working in the province since March 2020, and it has been working to increase public-private investment and to improve public investment efficiency. Without further ado, I'd just like to introduce our panelists. I'd like to go in the alphabetical order. So our first panelist is Dr. Momin Uppal. He is an associate professor with the School of Science and Engineering at LUMS. Dr. Uppal has a BS degree in electronic engineering from GK, and he also received his MS and PhD degrees in electrical engineering from Texas A&M University. He spent the summers of 2009 at NEC Labs of America, Princeton, New Jersey as a research assistant, and the summers of 2012 at Texas A&M University, Qatar as a visiting researcher. He has been associated with the LUMS School of Science and Engineering since October 2010. Our next panelist is Dr. Omar Mukhtar Khan. Dr. Omar is the team leader of the FCDO-funded Sustainable Energy and Economic Development Program. He is an experienced governance advisor with a demonstrated history of working in the international development sector and has worked with Department for International Development, now FCDO, for over 8 years. He has previously worked for Customs, VAT, and Planning Ministries. Dr. Omar has done his master's in public administration from Harvard Kennedy School. Omar is also an alumnus of International Anti-Corruption Academy, Vienna, and has done consulting assignments in various countries, including the United Kingdom, Austria, Slovenia, Tanzania, and Ukraine. He also writes frequently on public policy issues, including climate change and public sector reforms. Trekking and exploring Pakistan is a passion for Omar, and he has written extensively on sustainable tourism and heritage. Our next panelist is Dr. Syed Muhammad Ali. Professor Syed Muhammad Ali is a lead technical advisor for the SEED program. He is also World Bank's GFDR fellow with 26 years of professional experience in teaching, research, and consulting. He is professor of civil engineering at UET Peshawar. Dr. Ali established and remained director of largest earthquake engineering center of Pakistan for 11 years. He worked on national policy formulation by contributing to the development of the 3 engineering codes and advises government on complex technical issues. He specializes in climate and earthquake resilient infrastructure planning, design, and testing. Dr. Ali has worked on numerous mega projects like Orange Line Lahore, Karot Hydropower Project, M2 Rehabilitation Project, etc. He's also a pioneer of qualification testing of infrastructure in Pakistan. Our next panelist is Dr. Syed Mohammed Hasan. Dr. Syed Mohammed Hasan is an associate professor in the Department of Economics, LUMS. His primary research interest and teaching field is urban and regional economics and public economics. Dr. Hasan obtained his PhD in economics from Ohio State University. His doctoral research focused on spatial policy instruments and firms' productivity. Under the broad theme of sustainable development, Dr. Hasan also has interest in research on resilient cities. In this context, his research focuses on areas related to water conservation, economic cost of congestion, and energy choices by households and related carbon emissions in large urban centers of Pakistan. Dr. Hasan has several publications in international peer-reviewed journals. In 2007, he did his master's in public finance from GRIPS, Tokyo, Japan. Prior to joining academia, Dr. Hasan has also worked in the civil service of Pakistan. Our last panelist is Taimur Khan. Taimur Khan has worked as an advisor with over 20 years of experience. He's been providing consulting services in policy reforms, public investment management, evidence-based planning, and policy research. Over the past many years, he has worked on many bilateral and multilateral programs where his advisory services include project designing, planning better, management, monitoring, and evaluation. He also brings extensive experience of working with the public sector at different levels, where previously he has worked with both federal and provincial governments in Pakistan. In SEED, he is currently working as an institutional development advisor, where his work focuses on improving public investment efficiency, investment climate, tech innovation for improving public sector efficiencies, and evidence-based planning. So I would just like to begin. I'd like to give the floor to Dr. Omar Mukhtar Khan, who's the team lead for SEED program. He'll be giving a brief overview of the SEED program and what we're doing in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, and I think Hasan also used to work for customs. Yes. So we are both from customs, but we left it long time back. So, and Nadish was our program economist up till a few months back. But yeah, so half of our associates come from LUMS and the other half come from NUST, I think. So we end up employing a lot of people from LUMS in any case. So Sustainable Energy and Economic Development Program, as Nimrod suggested, that it's a £15 million UK aid program. So don't be terrorized by this a bit like too much complex slide. Basically, we work in two streams. One stream is about private investments and the other stream is about public investments. By private investments we mean जहाँ पर हम private sector को mobilize करते हैं और या multilaterals को mobilize करते हैं और public investment का largely it means that जो government का अपना development funding होती है उसको किस तरह बेहतर किया जाए. इन दोनों सेक्टर्स में जो हमारी कोशिश है वो बेसिकली ये है कि किस तरह केपी में प्राइवेट इन्वेस्टमेंट को बढ़ाया जाए और जो केपी के अपने रिसोर्सेज हैं पब्लिक इन्वेस्टमेंट उनकी एफिशिएंसी किस तरह हम इम्प्रूव करें और उसको भी उसकी नेट एब्सोल्यूट वैल्यू उसको किस तरह बढ़ाया जाए. तो ये बेसिकली दो ब्रॉड एरियाज हैं वेयर वी वर्क इन विद द गवर्नमेंट ऑफ खैबर पख्तूनख्वा. अच्छा, तो आज का जो हमारा एजेंडा है दैट इज़ मोर अराउंड क्लाइमेट रेजिलिएंट इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर एंड उसी कॉन्टेक्स्ट में वी जस्ट वांटेड टू शो यू सम ऑफ द सीड climate change portfolio. So we are doing mainly two type of work in the climate change sector. One is institutional and policy work. We support KP government in implementation of their climate action plan, which essentially means there are like 500 different actions and how to prioritize those actions and then lead to some sort of sustainable change when it comes to climate. We are also working with World Bank for a climate program, for a $200 million roughly climate change program. We are also supporting KP government in energy sector. You would realize that KP energy sector essentially is hydel and some solar. So I just want to stress that we don't work in sectors which are more fossil fuel based or coal based. So it's a bit like green energy sector where we provide support to KP government. We also are supporting tourism sector in KP by developing their business plans. And last but not the least, and that's what today's program is about, is climate resilient infrastructure, and I'll talk about it in a bit. The other thing we do, and as I mentioned, is climate investments. So by ITZ it means integrated tourism zones. So there is an integrated tourism zone in Mankial, Swat. Another one is in Ganul, which we are supporting. We are also supporting Pakhtunkhwa Energy Development Organization. We are trying to do with the UK government support. We are trying to do some solarization of economic zones. There is this program. We are providing support to Daraban Economic Zone, which is basically a food security sector project in Dera Ismail Khan. So we are also providing support for this particular transaction. Some of the very interesting work I think we are doing is in voluntary carbon market. This is a totally new concept for Pakistan, not for the world. And you would be happily surprised to know actually that Sindh government is the first government which have done a successful voluntary carbon markets project in Pakistan, and we are trying to work with them to achieve the same in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa now. So this is the same project I was talking about, carbon credit potential. So basically what we are doing is we are doing baseline data analysis on what kind of current carbon emissions, land use and deforestation rates are there. And based upon these kind of baseline studies, we will come up with a detailed feasibility report and see what is the carbon sequestration potential of various regions in KP, and then that would go into the market on competitive bidding. And we are pretty hopeful. Just to give you a number, that Sindh government is doing a project on mangroves, and their carbon credit revenue last year was around $15 million without spending a single penny of the government resources. So we are looking at some good potential in KP as well. Again, we are doing something similar with the energy portfolio in KP, and we are pretty hopeful that KP would be able to earn significant foreign exchange revenue in this sector because this is all renewable energy, nothing with fossil fuel or thermal energy, thermal or whatever. So I just want to talk briefly about another initiative, which is urban green infrastructure, improving urban green infrastructure in major centers. Currently, we are working in Peshawar to see, and this is in early stages, I would say, not advanced stages, it's written there, that what we can do to improve the green infrastructure in Peshawar, and I think Dr. Uppal would also, his presentation will also talk about it. So we are currently looking at 4 or 5 different areas, greening the waterfronts. Peshawar has extensive canal system, as well as there are rivers around Peshawar, Kabul River especially, and there are some smaller rivers as well. How to increase the permeability of the whole city in terms of green cover and new parks and everything. And then how to create green buffers around industrial area, between industrial areas and the residential areas. And as you guys would be aware that while Lahore is, I think, #1 most polluted city in the world, as per 2022, I think they have gone to 2nd now. But Peshawar is actually #5 in the whole world. So that's pretty disastrous for both Lahore and Peshawar to be in that range, I would say. So I hope that we do something good about it. Again, agriculture is often some area which is neglected by typical donor programs. This is again one area where we are trying to develop a concept node for international funding. There are international funds like Green Climate Fund, and there are other funds like that which provide resources for if you have a good concept and you can go and study about it. But this is again something which we want to do around farmer awareness as well as agri storage infrastructure plus integrated data solutions. I already talked about it a bit that we are working with World Bank to bring a climate change program in KP, focusing on not only governance but also actually some high impact mitigation and adaptation projects in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. This has a high ownership in KP government, and let's see where we go with the new government. We are pretty hopeful that it would be the same as previously. So this was very briefly a brief overview of some of the work we are doing on investments as well as on the policy side under SEED and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. But this brings us to the main topic we would be discussing today, which is planning climate resilient infrastructure in Pakistan. And before I hand it over to our technical team, I just wanted to give you a bit of context that you all would remember the 2022 floods. We know about it less in Punjab because it comparatively hit Punjab in a lesser way than it hit KP or especially Sindh. But these floods, they are like hundreds of deaths and injuries, and mind you that death is not a very good indicator of such disasters, because these disasters at times with the kind of information technology we have, people move away. The real thing is that these kind of disasters destroy their livelihoods of the poorest of the poor. So in this case, you can see 90,000 plus the houses damaged, and 700,000 people displaced, and there are other losses over there as well. So government of KP at this point asked us that how can you help us, and we tried to pivot around, but what we agreed with the government was that, okay, we will help you in designing of these projects, but we will only help you if you agree with that our project would be 100% climate resilient. I would leave it to Dr. Ali to tell you more about climate resilience, but as a layman, what I understand is that when we talk of climate resilience, it means that a bridge which is constructed in Chitral has to be differently constructed than when it is constructed in Peshawar or when it is constructed in DI Khan. Every place has a different climate requirements as per their own soil, as per their own earthquake vulnerabilities and everything. So we then extensively worked on developing those criteria, climate resilient criteria. And then we went forward with supporting KP government in some of those districts. And then we redesigned, and now KP government is trying to build those projects as per those new designs. So so here I would hand over to Dr. Ali to take you through some of the work we did on climate resilient infrastructure in KP. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Omar, thank you so much. It's a very complex topic, and we'll try to be summarizing in the most simplest possible words and terminology so I don't confuse those who are not engineers. First of all, to begin with the term resilience, actually, I remember in 2008-9, I was in Buffalo working with the professor Roinhorn, and he was supposed to present his research work in NSF meeting in DC. And he took from me some slides which he and I were jointly working on the earthquake of Pakistan 2005. At that time, Professor Roinhorn told me that nobody believes that resilience can be quantified because subjective or qualitative sort of categorization or descriptions are good enough, but they're not good enough to convince the policymakers. And they are not good enough for the governance purposes. So, but anyways, we worked on that, and that specific university has worked on California with regard to transportation systems. So carrying those resilience from that angle and then working all the way, and especially I have to acknowledge the program of SEED because many of you are researchers, the research is kept sitting in the libraries. It is maybe published in a very high impact factor journals, which I'm really not fond of being a professor because I want to see transformation happening at the ground. So with this perspective, I give a lot of credit to the program of SEED because jointly under the leadership of Dr. Umar and all my colleagues over here, we have been able to sort of make small dents at various locations. So let's start with this. Dr. Umar mentioned about the 2020 flood. I start with the 2010 floods actually. In 2010, a bridge which was built in Basham, actually I tried to had a movie clip over here, but because of the size and limitation it could not be shown. That was completely washed away. The bridge was built in 1980s, and 2010, you can just imagine in just like 30 years, it was just totally gone. Whereas the infrastructure like bridges need to be built to withstand and to be there for at least 75 years. Their useful life, design life is 75 years. So now just imagine that investment gone and the whole population disconnected from the rest of the country is a very big problem and a challenge. Okay, now coming to our specific issue, in KP, the government of KP requested SEED for the leftover projects. Some of the projects were taken up by World Bank. So there were 38 roads, which included 22 bridges, and about like 280 kilometers of road network, which nobody was there to actually pick them up and to do something about them. So SEED said, yes, let's do that. And that was 4 districts. One was Swat, the other was Lower Dir, Charsada, and Naushera. Now, Before I go further, I would just want to like to tell you that specific to this infrastructure, 7 PhDs were working on this work which I will be showing to you. Myself and the rest of the team, very senior people, on average I would say their experience would be like 20 years plus, working in academia, working in the industry, and then the challenge for us was to pick some reasonable number of infrastructure because we could not do all of them. So what we did was, the senior most experts, we visited all the sites. Now to come up which one to be picked up, if you see this sort of a matrix which defines the sort of consequences, for example, if you see this bridge, what would be the consequence if this bridge fails? So we sort of gave them number. By the way, this is taken from the USAID I think 2015 report in which they have brought up these matrices, and this very much coincides with the resilience works which we have been doing ourselves. On the vertical side is the likelihood and these, so both these two factors when multiplied, the most upper right top corner gives you 25 score, which is the highest. And after visiting all those treacherous area, meeting with the engineers over there, and meeting with the people over there, and we as an engineers, and even we had people who are socioeconomic experts, we came back and then we gave the numbers and we prioritized those structures, and the shortlisted structures were 20 roads, 14 bridges, and this was about 140 kilometers, and total of 34 projects we sort of scrutinized. The total worth of that infrastructure is estimated to be around 15 billion. So this was presented to SEED and then, the team of the other SEED members, and then to the government to agree upon that. So it was a sort of a consultative screening, very scientific, no political pressure that this one or that one. So based on some real data, we were able to shortlist them. Now, United Nations, UNDRR gives some principles which are given in this figure on the right. I'm sorry you can't see the number, but that actually are the fundamental concepts of inclusiveness. They ask that basically every development which has to be done has to be sustainable, and sustainability demands not only good engineering designs, but that is only one part of it. What about the social situation contribution? What about the economic impacts? And what about the community in general, and the, you can see the capacity of the departments who are supposed to build them, own them, manage them, and take them along. So this was a very complex task for us. So we, in this case, on the left side, if you see, we sort of defined these elements and features. For example, for a road, if I go to the next slide, just to explain you what I'm trying to tell. For example, if you see over here, technical. Now this is one parameter only. Environmental is the second parameter. Social is the third. Economic is the fourth, and institutional is the fifth one. Now these numbers of weightages like 47, 10, 15, this is not I or my team decided. We did surveys with the line department. We interacted with the various, society stakeholders, I would say, and we used the technique of AHP, analytical hierarchy procedure was adopted. One of our team member, his PhD work was related to development of AHPs. So this type of approach was used to come up with these weightages, which were then synthesized back and forth and finalized. Now, if you see the technical part, it is further divided into design, asset condition, materials, and many, many things. And each is then given the weight. And this weight is also not one person's decision, but in fact, it is a collective weightage given by non-engineers, engineers, various stakeholders. And then, if you see, before the intervention, we did the scoring of that we did actually. So for example, this is just a randomly picked example. This infrastructure, whichever is that infrastructure, a bridge or a road, gets 11 marks in total out of 47. The PC ones which we did, the detailed feasibility design which we did, has been submitted to the government, if we implement that, we are expecting that the score will go up to 47 actually. If you come to the environment, if you see the score, it is 6. We can't change because our project was actually a rehabilitation project. We could not shift the infrastructure elsewhere. So we are bound, and so we cannot change the environment. So that is our, you can say, sort of a constraint over here. Then social, the marks given are 15. 12 we calculated pre-intervention, and it will be we hope it will go to 14. Similarly economics, and similarly institutional. Institutional is one of the very important aspect because we know the government line departments, their capacity, and we're doing a lot of trainings to improve this as well. So by the way, the PC1s, the Planning Commission Performance, which we prepared, all of them for each infrastructure has this number. And why we wanted to have this? Because we want to have transparency. Because we want to have scientific, quantifiable evaluation. No subjective, no quantitative. And then accountability can then be ensured if these parameters are there for somebody to measure them. Now coming to the first part, which was the most interesting part, actually it was not supposed to be a direct output. The direct output actually envisioned was to deliver the PC1s, the project feasibility designs, like 5 billion rupees or 2 billion rupees, and then approval by CDWP or PDWP, and then tendering, and then department is constructing them. But the hydrology part, hydrology and hydraulics was one of the very key feature which came out. And then Dr. Omar and his team decided, and I will show you in the later slides, that we have gone beyond that. So let's point to this. There is some information which my colleague Taimur will be sharing with regard to data. I don't want to talk on that. We acquired the data for the last 30 years from various departments. And what we did was we picked up the GCMs. GCMs are the global circulation models of the climate of the entire planet. So they are for the entire region. They cannot be directly used because it will give you an average value of, let's say, some number. That rainfall in the entire Pacific is, for example, 10 millimeter, which is not good. For Pakistan, for this region, I need to be specific. So those GCMs need to be scaled down to a level, to our regional level, and that once converted can be then used. So that is sort of a, you can say, sort of a calibration, and it takes supercomputing type of computation to do that work. So you have to do a lot of iterations, a lot of computer work. Our hydrology team has worked on that, and they have developed that. Then they have used the SMIP6 model. That is actually the latest one which is there. And what is that? This model actually gives you or the people who are working 5 choices. The first choice is SSP1, the most ideal, I would say, the more ideal one, that the world is behaving the most perfect way. No CO2 emissions, no global warming, and everything is perfectly perfect. By the way, this is not the realistic scenario. The second one is the SSP2, and that is the sort of a middle road scenario. We use this as our first scenario to be looking all our designs and our costs according to this scenario. Forget about the 3 and 4. The last one is the SSP5, which means the world is not behaving well. We are using a lot of fossil fuel and a lot of things are happening. Now these scenarios are actually giving us the tools and ability, because the point over here is we want to do the future projections. What will happen from 5 years from now? What will happen from 10 years from now? Generally, up till now, the general practice in Pakistan, I would say, is to use the historic data. What flood happened in 2010? 1992 flood was on the eastern side of Pakistan, River Jhelum, and these areas were not to the Indus side. So we'll use that historic data and we'll say, oh, let's now design our hydropower project, our bridge, our buildings and everything. But in this case, we say no. Looking into these possible scenarios, SSP2 or SSP5, what could be the projected flood in the future. For that, we need to first predict the temperature on which Taimur will be talking, and based on those temperatures, we'll be predicting the flows in the streams, and for that we are going to design our infrastructure. So this is the key point which many engineers right now, and we are witness to many official high-level meeting, that our practicing engineers are not fully aware of this scenario, that what it is. So anyways, we have used these tools, and I will show you very quickly. This is the map. This is our those first phase of our CRI, which I just mentioned, that we shortlisted. So in this 4 districts are highlighted, which we have used, and these infrastructure is there. But right now, SEED has started to work on the entire KP. We are doing the modeling of the entire Khyber Pakhtunkhwa for the Indus Basin included. There are about 10 basins now, which are listed over here. And we are studying that, and in the coming month, we will be submitting our sort of all the calculations and policy recommendations. With the climate change, there is a lot of degradation which is happening in the infrastructure. Accelerated degradation is happening. You see the deterioration of pavement, you see the deterioration and cracks in the structures, and that leads to a lot of very heavy investments. By the way, this is not a challenge only for Pakistan, this is a challenge for the developed countries as well. So these are big challenges which are being posed to us. Now this is for now my last slide, and then I will hand over to Taimur. These are the basins of the Indus study which we are currently doing. We just calculated these values. If you see, the blue one is the historic flow, discharge, flood value, Qmix or Q6, whatever you call it. The green one is the SSP2. The red one is the most worst case scenario, SSP5. And now we are talking up to year 2100. What could be possible scenarios? If you see the numbers, frankly, again, my eyesight and little, but if you see the numbers, very easily they are like 30, 40%, and in some cases, they are even 200% of the observed flood in different scenarios. So now policymakers have to decide on these numbers, which one to pick and which one not to pick. It's all, but the history is proving that there is a lot of destruction happening. I'll talk after a while on a few other things, and I will request Taimur to please talk on the temperature.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. Well, I'm coming in because I think most of you will be interested in the data part. Dr. Saab mentioned that we use 30 years of data. Now, this is 30 years of climate data, which include temperature, daily temperature. Now, this is daily data for 30 years, daily temperature, minimum temperature, maximum temperature, and precipitation in different parts of KP. So when Dr. Saab told me that we need this data, my first reaction was, oh God, 30 years of daily data, how will we get it? First, we tried to get it from some open sources which are available online, which one of them, I guess, is NASA, and
yes,
there are a couple of others. However, when we checked it with the real data, we had some data for one station, which is Nowshera Chirat. We realized there is a big difference between the actual data, the actual temperatures, and the data projected through those satellites. So then we decided that we need real data from Met department for the temperature and precipitation, and river flow data from either WAPDA or irrigation or Pakhtunkhwa Energy Department PDO. So I first went to the irrigation department. Then there was a record room. I somehow managed to reach there through the secretary office, and there they told me that yes, they have some data. They have data for the last 2-3 years. But I was told that the meter was there from the last 40-30 years. Yes, we had the data. It was in a hard copy. They used to write it. They did not have any computer, so they used to write it on paper. And unfortunately, in the last rain in Peshawar or flood in Peshawar, they lost the flood data in a flood. because it was on paper, there was no soft copy. So irrigation was done. We went to then PEDO. They had some data, but again, it was not a daily data. They had annual averages, and Dr. Saab told me that this is meaningless for us. We need daily data. So the last hope was WAPDA. We went to WAPDA. I'm telling you all this because you will encounter all of this when in your researches. WAPDA, they had all the data available. However, we needed approval from the GM, which is a 20 or 21 grade officer. The file started from the SDO office, then went to the XCN, then to the director, then the chief engineer, and the GM. And on every step, we had to do a sifarish. Dr. Saab will call one of its students, and I have to beg someone to please push the file, push the file. It went all the way to the GM, he signed it, came back to the SDO, and then we paid the money. They actually sell the data, the climate data, and then we, legally. Yeah, and then the Met department, it took us a couple of months in the Met department to get the data because apparently there was a challan which has to be signed by a treasury. I don't know why, it was our money. And the treasury guy said that we don't sign such challans. We had to then go to the finance, special secretary finance for such a small thing. We ended up paying them 1.5 million rupees. And also it took us a couple of months and we finally got the data. There were many issues with the data, which you can imagine with such data which they are collecting for 30 years, but it was still useful, very useful. Then the data was put in the climate model which we were using, and we got the results for the next 80, 90 years. The climate indicators, what are we going to expect in the 2100. And the results are not very encouraging. That's in front of you. In whether it's Dir or Swat or Nowshera or Peshawar or Charsadda, you should expect a rise of 5.5 to 5.7 to 5.8 degree of temperature. And that's not just these cities. Then we, on the Kurum River Basin, for the Kunar, then the Tang and the Gomal, everywhere, we should expect a 5 to 5.5 degree increase in average temperature in all those years, in the next 80, 90 years. Now, what does it mean? Just to give you, it's not a very good example, but just to give you the perspective, in the last peak ice age, some 2,000 years ago, the global temperature was around 10 degrees Celsius. Now it's around 15 degrees Celsius, despite the Industrial Revolution. So it took us around 2,000 years for a 5 degree change in temperature. And we are saying that in Charsadda and Nowshera, in the next 78 years, a 5 degree increase in temperature will occur. Now, some of these places will not be livable anymore. We will have serious agricultural challenges. We will have serious food security issues. Water will be a serious issue, and we should expect more natural disaster and a serious ecosystem disruption unless the world changes the way it is behaving. Not just Pakistan. We are unfortunately the worst in terms of climate impact, but we are not the main polluters. So even if we stop burning the fossil fuel altogether in Pakistan, won't help us much. So this is what we are up to against, and gives us more reasons to invest in adaptation and climate resilient infrastructure. And how should we do it? Dr. Saab informed you about the technical aspects, that we should start spending the money wisely, whatever we have, and start spending it on resilient infrastructure. And apart from it, we should start engaging with the communities. The infrastructure we are building or we are helping them build, I think one of the few projects will be met communities in each of the locations. In all the 34 locations, we met the women, we met the most vulnerable, including the differently able people, and we asked them about what kind of infrastructure do they need? Because different people have different needs. There's their infrastructure, their money. So we met them and some amazing results. Dr. Saab, if you give us the technical how this had made the difference in designing the infrastructure. So over to you, Dr. Saab, these meetings.
Right. In this picture you see Amna, she was part of, she is socio-economic expert, and she has met with the women and all those, and based on our collective sort of wisdom from the society and ourselves and the department. For example, this is a road you can see, typically in these areas, there is a just road provided and that's all. But if you see the proposed cross-section, on both sides we have provided a sort of a walkway for pedestrians. Beneath that are two, you can see tunnels. One is for the carrying the flood water or the typical drainage water will be flowing through it. The other one can be used for utilities and slightly raised. By the way, this is just not arbitrarily done. Calculations are made for the flood. We have done the counting of the vehicles. We have done the projection of those vehicles. We have done on all these routes. Multiple teams have, not for a very long period, but for a week or more, they have been deployed for various periods of time, and we have done the projections, and then we have come up with this width and then this whatever I'm showing you right now in front of us. So this was one, you will not find this design in any drawing all across Pakistan. This I mean you can pick up and you can verify. So it's specifically done over here. Now this is a very interesting and a example to present to you. This is the Khal Japani Bridge, Lower Dir. This bridge was built by the Japanese, my guess is in 90s. But you know what happened? This is a 2020 flood, but let me show you first 2010 flood. Now if you see this picture, the Khal Japani Bridge on the top left picture, the two steel spans, the superstructure is perfectly fine. The engineer would come and say, oh, I'm no inquiry, nothing. My bridge is standing. I have 100 by 100 marks. But does the society ready to give me 100 by 100 marks? Just see the right picture on the bottom. You can see a glimpse of a lady. I have been showing this picture to my students in my master's in the class of bridge engineering, and I used to tell them when I see this picture, literally sometimes I want to cry. Because now you see there will be pregnant women who have to travel. There will be sort of sick women and children and old people who need to now pass. And in front of you, this picture speaks that what would have happened during this entire scenario when this was till the time it was rebuilt. So it is just not the infrastructure, it has a huge societal impact, social, economics, psychological. I mean, one of my cousin, I mean, not part of this team, he has worked, he's a psychologist, psychiatrist in Muzaffarabad. He worked on patients in the aftermath of 2005 earthquake. So it's unbelievable to listen to what trauma is there. In mind, I go back again, and now this is 2022. Now this time, you can see on the top left corner, the one span with steel girder is just lying like 100, 200 meters downstream. And in the right picture, if you see, I've put an arrow over here. There is no bridge. One span is there, the other one is gone. Back to square one. And if you see, you can see a cable car which people are using. By the way, SEED has again started working right now. Our teams are working to develop the standards on, because there are no standards on the cable. You have came across the incident which happened a couple of months back in Mansehra, district Mansehra, that the helicopter was there and no standards are there. So we are working to give them some policy guidelines. So now people have installed these small sort of a makeshift dolly or whatever you call it, just by by tukka, I would say, and they are using it. Women are using it, people are using it. It's a very busy place. Myself visited over there. Now, we have done the flood calculation, we have done the hydrology, hydraulics part, how much forces and what will happen, all the engineering calculation. And now we came up with this bridge. This is the cross section. If you take the bridge and cut it, for example, we are sitting in this room, cross section means you cut this room, for example, right to left. My right to left, if you cut this room, you will see it like this. Now, this is just not, again, an arbitrarily some CAD draftman or engineer has just come up with something. No, it's not like that. We debated on this for hours, that what should be there. Based on our interviews, based on the locality, because there is a bazaar on both the sides and very busy area. On the left you see it's a raised walkway for people, which can be used by women, by elderly, or whosoever wants to be totally away from the traffic. And you can see two hollow pipes which can provide the utilities can cross through this. On the extreme right, if you see, we have provided a cycle lane and cart lane. It's an economic hub sort of place where there, so we have sort of dedicated it exclusively for carts and cycles, so they can use it. And the middle portion will be used for normal vehicular traffic. So all these dimensions, everything came up specifically for this site. So this is something we wanted to highlight, that because of the sort of inclusive approach, this is sort of a development led by the demand of the people, we would say. And by the way, it's a very difficult task to arrive to this point. You have to bring all those engineers and non-engineers and society and the department to this point. Now this, based on our studies, the height of the bridge is to be raised, and many things, some special things we have proposed which will be done. Now one question which is asked, and this is my almost the last slide, just one slide will be there. The question which is asked by the people who matter, who are the decision maker, they always ask, how much cost, how we are going to bear it? This is a very typical question, and this is not only asked in Pakistan. I being a Hausner fellow from GFTRR, which you mentioned in the beginning, I have happened to meet the engineers who have done legislation for the US Congress as well, because of my summer school training in California. So they came up and they told us their stories, same scenario. That the congressman will say, no, this is too much money, you will asking this and that. Same question over here, and this is a common question all over the world. Now, I will show you some statistics. The rough cost estimate by the department for rehabilitating this bridge to the same condition before the flood, about 275 million. We have done extensive geotechnical investigation, surveying, land surveying, and all these other surveys, and this specific design, discarding the previous structure, our cost is 333 million. Okay, one part. I showed you same bridge in 12-year span, it was washed away. The bridge life supposed to be 75 years. I am taking 25 years as a period where every time this bridge will be going out because of the conventional design. So 25 into, you can multiply, you can see, comes out somewhere around 1 billion or so, something like that. And if you spend 333 million, you're saving that. So this is the point which we want to clarify to the people who sit there and they start rejecting the projects. Oh, it is, that consulting firm is giving me for 280 million. And Dr. Saab, you are giving 333 million. And they forget about these consequences, which we are showing them with numbers, with examples and everything. I think that is very important to remember. Just one last slide. Overall, SEED has done tremendous job. Again, I have to commend, I've been telling my SEED team that if you people were not there and if you were not required, we would have developed the bridge code maybe 10 years or 12 years back. We would have done all these things many years back as structural engineers, as a faculty, but it's simply not possible because to bring in all the possible stakeholders, the decision makers, to convince them, it needs really a very synergized approach and focused and not being going right and left. So that is the key. And during this course, we have developed you will be amazed to know, Pakistan, 260 million people, and such a big country, and we have trillions of assets of bridges. We don't have a code, legal binding code in Pakistan. So SEED has taken up this project, and we are done. We have gone through all the bridge codes of the world. We have picked up the AASHTO American code because it is largely used, and many, many other logics. We have also developed modular design. Modular design is such a wonderful tool, very simple. Small projects, the line department have to do themselves. Their engineers are busy in files. Their engineers are busy in talking to the members of the parliament. Their engineers are busy talking to the administrative people, and so many things, tendering and construction and this. They generally forget engineering. So for small projects, we have given them such an interesting tool, which is online available, open. SEED has done it, has made it open for the entire country. Any engineer in Punjab or Sindh or Balochistan can use it. Within minutes, they can put the input data. Definitely, these are for small infrastructure, and it will, I believe, 80% of the typical infrastructure, roads and bridges, retaining walls, causeways, all these will be covered. And when you put the data, and it gives you the ready-made PC1s, which is the requirement, legal requirement, to be submitted to the approving forum, and it gives you the cost estimate as per the approved rates of the government. And the engineer can do a lot of iterations there and then to sort of optimize it. So this is another thing which we have done. We have been providing them trainings as well. We have also developed some standardized checklists for the approval processes. I don't want to go into details because it will take a lot of time. And just to mention again, these projects which we have been done, very rigorous engineering work has been done. Millions and millions are spent to do the geotechnical investigations. We engaged a very good firm from Lahore actually, which is which have worked with us in KP and traffic count studies and topographic surveys and many, many other things. With this, I will thank you so much.
And we see that there are several changes over here. So areas in Balochistan have slightly become greener over here, but most of the Punjab districts as well as some of the Sindh districts have gone down or became worse in terms of per capita emissions from the household. So if we connect this information along with information on migration within the country, so whether that is intra-province migration or inter-province migration, we use the labor force survey data to look into that, and we find out the highest rate of migration, intra-province migration is in Punjab, and the highest rate of inter-province migration is from the rest of the country to Sindh. So we can have some idea about the repercussions of this change in the greenness numbers over here. So more people moving to Punjab urban areas within Punjab, or more people moving from other provinces to Sindh would definitely lead to more emissions in the coming time periods. Okay, so as I just mentioned, that urbanization is something which is going to have consequences related to the demand for the energy, and we talked briefly about migration, but typically we expect that when households move to urban areas, they would be serviced with better or cleaner fuel sources, as well as they are expected to have some infrastructure which is cleaner overall in terms of provision of service, like public transport system or better disposal of household garbage. But if that is not taking place, then all of these would add to the emissions which these urban residents are going to face, and this would hamper the potential of the urbanization which we expect to take from. So as we said earlier, that we are also interested in across region variations over time. So this box plot over here represents these total household emissions over the 2 time periods in the left panel and the per capita emissions in the right panel. And we have here both for 2013 and 14 figures. We can see this middle line in the box plot represents the median. So we do not see much change in the median. Let's say if we focus on the mega city category over here, we do not see much change in the median values. But if we look at the per capita emissions, we see that these per capita emissions have slightly gone down for mega cities in 2019 compared to 2014, which we are going to see in a while in other maps as well. So moving forward, as I mentioned earlier about the compact city hypothesis, we expect that when people move from rural areas which are dispersed settlements to more concentrated or more dense urban populations, we expect them to be more exposed to an environment in which their emissions might go down. But although this holds true for cities in the developed countries, but this does not hold for cities in developing countries, and particularly this does not hold for cities in Pakistan. So we'll see that in a second. So we were kind of intrigued to find out that what is leading to more emissions in 2018-19 compared to 2013-14, and we explored 2 major sources of which might be causing this, and this figure over here, which is the share of firewood in household emissions. So what is the share of household in the total emissions by the household? And we see that a lot of districts have from green and yellow category have moved to red and orange category over here, and this mentions or refers to the proportion or the percentage of firewood in their total emissions. So we see from this map over here that a lot of switch from something is taking place to firewood, and firewood is typically considered around 2.5 times more in terms of emissions compared to natural gas. So we wanted to find out what is causing this shift in more use of firewood. We know from anecdotal evidence that the country is facing a shortage of the natural gas in terms of use for cooking or heating for the households, but we want to explore that through the data, and the data tells us a similar story. So here we can see that earlier the share of natural gas in household emissions was quite higher in 2013-14, but this share has gone down. So looking at these 2 figures, the one showing the increase in share of firewood and the one over here which is showing the decrease in the share of emissions due to natural gas, we can understand that over time these households are switching from a cleaner source of energy to a source of energy which is emitting 2.5 times more compared to what they were using earlier as a fuel for cooking and heating. Moving ahead, this is a stack bar chart to show the distribution of emissions from various categories. We see that the garbage, which is for which there is, I guess, like the PSLM data tells us that around 70% of the households live in a community in which there is no formal garbage collection method. So this is a considerable portion of the emissions from the households. We see that the natural gas share is decreasing. So natural gas share over here is decreasing, and the firewood share is persistently increasing across the 4 provinces, but very rapidly in case of KP and Punjab. This is something of a similar description of emissions from various energy types and the household garbage, but this is divided on the regional basis between the rural, urban, and the mega city category. And moving further, so these are some of our broad findings. which tell us that hotspots for carbon emissions tend to cluster around mega cities. City carbon emissions increased over the study period. We have seen that. And although Pakistan major cities' household carbon emissions are lower than those of the greenest cities of US, but these are comparable to cities in India and China. And some of the important findings is if we look at the overall emissions and the share of garbage in that, so the emissions due to improper disposal of garbage is around 24% for urban households. So the carbon footprint of urban households, a quarter of that come from the improper disposal of garbage. Firewood accounts for around half of the carbon emissions in rural areas, and the use of firewood is increasing even for urban households over time, which is something alarming and needs attention. So, as somebody, I think Dr. Ali mentioned a little while ago about increase in temperatures, and if we look at earlier studies, we find out that cities account for approximately 70% of carbon dioxide emissions. So systematic effort to decarbonize cities is critical for staying below the 1.5 degree global warming target, which hopefully we should be able to meet. And in this case, it is important to look into the contribution of firewood, transport fuels, and household garbage as they differently affect households in rural and urban areas. This is the emissions from household use of public transport. We segregated these into three categories. So cabs use petrol, rickshaws use CNG, and buses use diesel. This is for the provinces. And okay, so now we come here and focus on, in the last few slides, focus on the 10 major cities of Pakistan in terms of population, where almost half of the country's population lives. And these are listed over here, starting from Faisalabad, Gujarat, Hyderabad, Karachi, Lahore, Multan, Peshawar, Quetta, Rahim Yar Khan, and Rawalpindi. And this is again the breakdown of public transport used by households. We see some increase in the use of buses in case of Multan, and also in case of Lahore and Rawalpindi and some other places as well. This could be driven by increasing petrol prices or other reasons as well. But we still see that in case of Lahore, suppose Lahore is here, 40% of emissions from public transport come from rickshaws, so something which can probably be fixed quickly. This is a similar stack bar across energy types for these 10 cities. We see what we have seen earlier in the heat maps over here. Would, in the interest of time, just move on from here. Okay, finally we have greenness ranking for the cities. So we developed it for the almost more than 100 districts of Pakistan. And this is the district, then the province here. This is per capita emissions in 2014, per capita emissions in 2019, and then the rank of the cities in terms of their greenness. So the lower the number over here, the more green that area is. And we also saw that whether a change took place in the rank over this time period or not. A change means whether they moved a quantile up or a quantile down. So we see that in terms of per capita emissions, Gujranwala has the lowest per capita emissions and gets the highest rank. And आप लोग KP Peshawar को ज़्यादा interested होंगे. It's not doing bad, but Lahore and Pindi are the ones who have the highest numbers over here, showing that the lowest rank they occupy in this overall greenness ranking. This is okay. So we have talked about many of these points. Just quick reference to some points on which future research can focus. One is this energy ladder hypothesis, where we see that household cooking choices transition from traditional to modern as their income improves. We do not know whether this holds for cities, for people in Pakistan, because typically better income people move to cities, but what are their fuel choices in cities? We also want to highlight the significance of the increased use of firewood and gendered energy poverty. Gendered energy poverty in rural areas has exposed females to health hazards, premature death, domestic fire, accidents, and then poverty in terms of time poverty. So much of their time is spent on collecting this firewood and bringing that back to home, has health consequences as well for them. Yeah, and finally, exploring the potential of renewable energy resources for these households as we face depleting energy resources or clean fuels, and probably that is the key to energy resilience for these households. So that is all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a very pertinent and very important question. The answer is yes. Remote sensing, especially in case, satellite images, if we have access to high resolution images, so they will be primarily, if you remember, I mentioned about the GCMs, global circulation models. Those employ the use of the land cover, what type of land cover it is, because that is one of the key factor which helps the computer model to sort of see how much water will be retained in the within the area and how much it will be flowing out and will be accumulating. First part. The second part, this is the hydrology part. The second part is the hydraulics. Let's say we have found out that on a larger scale that this would be the magnitude of the flood. Now when it passes through a specific location, let's say it is crossing the Ravi bridge, now comes the hydraulics part, where we need to have again the very high accurate sort of all of the topography of that area, because without our bridge, what will be the level of flood, how far it will spread, and in which manner it will spread, and when we put the bridge in that location, what will be the another scenario. So from that perspective, definitely it is highly useful. By the way, when Dr. Saab was telling, I was just scribbling down some of the notes, because remote sensing is definitely one of the extremely important. I recall one of the scientists in American Geophysical Union fall meeting, which I attended a couple of years back, in which one of the scientists was working using the satellites, and they were working on the Islamabad area for sort of hazard related to earthquakes. So yes, it is extremely important and useful, and it will definitely be helping in all these fashions.
Thank you, Dr. Ali. Just one more question. So Dr. Syed Hasan here talked about energy resilience. So your climate model was basically for infrastructure, but what about larger infrastructure projects? So for example, hydropower plants. Do you think that, how important is it that we input predictive climate modeling data into that while we're making the designs for those? So will that help in building energy resilience for the province, for the country?
I was member of, you mentioned in my intro in general, I was specifically mentioning that I was member of the Pakistan Electrical and Telecommunication Safety Code developed by the Pakistan Engineering Council back in 2013 and 14. And working in this area, by the way, I've done some research with the power students, electrical power students as well, with respect to resilience. We use a term, especially with regard to earthquake, but it is equally applicable elsewhere, cascading effects of disasters. If energy resilience is not there, forget about the flood, forget about the earthquake, whichever damage is causing, but those effects will be multiplied and multiplied and multiplied several folds, and the situation becomes even more chaotic. For example, if energy is not there, hydropowers are down, or the transmission is not there, hospitals will not be able to treat the patients. How long would you be using the diesel generators to support them? And we have seen this in 2005 earthquake. Similarly, telecommunication system will go down ultimately because of lack of power. Similarly, clean drinking water supply, if pumping is to be done, will not be there. Sewage disposal will not be there. So energy, I think, it will be the most critical element if it uses, because we have done some meetings, Dr. Omar was also there, some steering committee, without mentioning any specific details, but generally those sitting at the dealing with the power, they were of not, they had sort of, they did not had the idea of using these climate predictions and using them. So it is the need of the day, I would say, very critical for energy sector as well.
I am an electrical engineer, so that means I'm going to be talking about some technology. And in particular, how could we use remote sensing, geospatial AI for generating data which could ultimately be used for this climate resilience we're talking about. So I not only am associated with electrical engineering, I also direct something called City at LUMS. This is the Center for Urban Informatics, Technology and Policy. So I'm going to spend a few slides on just talking about what City is. We are a collective of multidisciplinary experts who try to marry technology and data with some policy, and Hasan Saab is part of that initiative, along with strategic partnerships to drive change. And over this past year and a half, we were very young, we've been able to develop these partnerships with entities like Lahore Waste Management Company. We're deploying a solution for them. With Punjab Emergency Services Department, we have a solution for them as well. We work with Punjab Safe City Authority. We work with Wall City, Lahore, and then the list goes on and on. So primarily in Punjab, mostly in Lahore, looking forward to working in KPK as well, inshallah, sometime. And so if I divide our work, the city's work, so we of course are academics, so there's a lot of research that goes on. But then it's not just, as somebody was pointing out, it's not just journal papers who bahut nikalte rehte hain. I mean, we don't really care about them so much anymore. It's how we translate that to solutions that could be deployed at stakeholders and premises. So we have another wing, which is the city solutions, and the video that you see is one of the solutions we have for traffic counting. And then we also have an academy. So we do these training workshops. We've done them for 1122. We've done them for waste management companies and so on and so forth. So this was about city. I want to move on now to what this briefly, remote sensing. I think hopefully everyone is familiar with what remote sensing is. But this is a definition that came, that I picked up from NASA's website. It's acquiring information from a distance. This could be aerial photography, this could be drone photography or sensing, but the one that's mostly used, because that's publicly available, is satellite imagery, which could be in the visible spectrum, which could be in the invisible spectrum as well. What is Geo AI? AI is the buzz, and Geo AI is the application of AI on this geospatial data to accelerate the understanding of business opportunities, environmental impacts, and operational risks. So this definition is from the makers of ArcGIS, and they have now these Geo AI tools as well, and we develop our own. And why remote sensing? I mean, there are of course challenges, and one of the challenges was highlighted by Taimur Saab. We can leave that to the discussions later as well. But there are pros as well, that it provides access to inaccessible regions, or inaccessible on the ground. There's proxy for missing ground information. They're globally available and inexpensive, and most of them are publicly available for free. But they are highly unstructured, and they're varying levels of accuracy, varying levels of spatial resolution, and then you need some processing on it, AI, to automatically extract useful insights. So I'm just going to talk about some use cases here. This is not directly related to climate resilience, but the data this generates could be extremely beneficial for doing these analysis. So this is an automated building detection algorithm, which looks at the satellite imagery. I mean, you could have somebody sit and mark the buildings one by one for the entire Lahore city, or you could have AI do it. This is what the AI does. So this is one of our models that I built, that we built, sorry. There's no I. And what could you do with this? So these are actually buildings densities, or actually the dots that you see are actually a single building. This is DHA phase 5 in 2010, this was 2014, this was 2020. Now if I had wanted, I could knock on the DHS door and get this data, but then I would have come across all of the problems that Mursa was mentioning. And we've come across all of those problems that you were mentioning. But then this publicly available imagery is there. We could just find out when a building was built based on historical imagery that's available. And this, for example, this is an aggregated information about how the number of buildings has expanded in DHA Lahore over the past 10 years. And this is not just an aggregated data. Remember, at the back end, there's raw information, which is geospatial. You actually know where a building was built, when, up to a resolution, spatial resolution, not up to an entire day, but to a few months, if you will. So this was just one application. The other could be, so this is Lahore's population density. Now, I know that there's density map available for World Pop. That's publicly available. There's one available by Meta, but we found lots of problems with them. I mean, it shows population hotspots at places जो कि आप अगर satellites से देखें, they're just barren. But what you could do is all of these building footprints that we have here, we've done this for entire Lahore, and then use that to disaggregate the census data. So census data उठाएं for a bigger region, just count the number of buildings that they are in the region. Then you have points of interest, that's also publicly available. Where are the commercial areas? So land use classification, an indirect way of doing that is through publicly available POIs from, for example, Google Maps. You know what the road network is, we can build that using AI, and then just build this and use this for lots of applications. Transport coverage, orange line ki baat ho rahi thi. So for example, we have these analysis available on the web. Lahore में transport coverage कितनी population को cover करती है in 5 minutes of walking. So all of this could be used for those applications. This is another application. Bricklins is known to be one of the polluters, but where are they exactly? Geospatially, I know Punjab had the census about this, but this is an AI tool which automatically detects, and we did this for entire South Asia. And for example, tree cover. So I know you could pick up NDVI from remote sensing, but this is much more than that. This picks up visual features and the optical imagery and identifies where the trees are, not just the green spaces, but trees where. So for example, this is a sample image for LUMS. This is a sample image for the entire tree cover in Lahore. All right, so moving on from this, I know Nimra said floods, like I'm going to take a detour here. Floods, if we have time, we can talk about those. But I'm going to connect this to tree cover. So this is now a sort of an academic study. I'm थोड़ी सी depth में थोड़े से चले जाते हैं, शायद नहीं भी जाते हैं. I don't know how much time I have. So this is a study that we did for Lahore. How do green spaces impact the land surface temperature? And primarily, what is that relationship of cooling effects on some parameters associated with those green spaces? There could be shape, and as we're going to talk about, and just to do these studies. So the data that we used for this is preliminary work. This is not published yet. The NDVI, which is a vegetation index, you can pick up from satellites at 30-meter resolution. The land surface temperatures, and I know this has some noise issues, but it's a good indicator of the land surfaces, as well as we used the optical imagery to detect where the green spaces are, parks are, as well as data from OSM, OpenStreetMaps, as well as from Google Maps. And we collated all of them to identify 1,179 green spaces in Lahore. So this was, we have the geospatial locations of all green space and the shapes. We have polygons for those green spaces. Now, what do we do with them? We then figure out what are the cooling effects of each and every one of those green spaces in the city. What do I mean by cooling effects? So this is traditionally that you would find in the literature. What a green space or would actually do is this would have the lowest temperature at the center, and then as you move away outside the green space into the urban areas, there's going to be an increase and then perhaps a decrease and something like this. So there's some factors here, which is cooling extent. I mean, without cutting through the jargon, this just means the cooling impact जो है कितनी दूर तक जाता है किसी भी green space का. That would be the cooling extent. Cooling strength would be how significant is the cooling effect in terms of temperature. That would be the cooling strength, and then there's something called the cooling gradient as well. What is the rate of change of the temperature as you move out of the green space? So we did this analysis for all of the 1179 shapes that we have in the city, and then try to find out if the relationship of those with some key factors, which I've just listed 3. There are many others that we did. The vegetation index, the area, and the shapes as well of the neighborhoods, and so on and so forth. And what we found out, so these are just sample results for Lahore. Unfortunately, I don't have exactly, for those of you in Lahore, कि ये किस green कौन से वाले park के साथ है, ये किस polygon park के साथ है, but I mean right now, but we have that raw data. So the typically they follow the same trend, but there are some exceptions, and that remains to be seen. For example, why this occurs, where I mean, it's actually a decrease first. Maybe there are some buildings on the surroundings. We don't know, but there are some cases like this as well, and we're treating them as outliers into our analysis. But the average cooling extent we found was about 132 meters. No, not the average. Ranging from 132 meters to 463 meters in the city of Lahore. The average cooling strength for all green spaces combined was about 0.4 degrees in the city of Lahore. And then what are the relationship with different factors? There are only 3 that I list. One of them is NDVI. For those of you who are not familiar with NDVI, this is actually a vegetation index, and that makes sense. Okay, the greener the green space is, the better the cooling impact is going to be. Area is also, I mean, so that's confirmed from evidence. And then the shape complexity of the neighboring urban green spaces. So this is something we're just still grappling with. What do these results mean? I don't want to confuse you because we're still struggling with this. I mean, what do they actually mean? But it has to do with how much the ratio of the parameter to the area. I mean, जो urban area के साथ, buildings के साथ कितना connection है उस green space का, how does that impact the cooling strength? So there's some positive correlations with that area as well. So I'll leave it at that. And these are the conclusions. Of course, majority of green space in Lahore provide significant thermal benefits, so make more. Higher vegetation index results in better cooling effects. That's also intuitive. But then we don't know the tree cover ka kya impact hai. So we've not done that yet. We were only evaluating green space and NDVI, but we would want to separate that with the regular vegetation from the tree cover and figure out what is that impact. And then something also we found is fragmented smaller greener spaces appear to be more beneficial than a larger space. So that's also from the evidence that has come out of this. Okay, so very quickly, this is 2022 floods mapping in Sindh. This was based from satellite imagery from Sentinel-1, Sentinel-2, as well as from NatSat. So the radar imagery as well as optical imagery. And then so this is I think from August 2022, I forget the date, jahan se humne uthai thi imagery. And actually, Hasan Saab is an author of this paper. He is more of a supervisor than myself, so I'm taking the liberty of presenting this on his behalf. So this is published, and so all we did was, so these from based on the satellite imagery, certain signal processing, and then we found out this is where the flooding was in August 2022. These are the areas where the flooding was. These are geospatial information. But then we just went to OSM and picked up where the roads are. And then picked up, so for example, and then just overlay this on top of this, and try to figure out what were the roads that were impacted by these floods. What was kaun se districts say which were most impacted, what was the length of the road that was impacted, and so on and so forth. So you just overlay that geospatial information and try to get an estimate of what the impact was. Similarly, this is the affected population. So this population density estimate is not our own. This is from World Pop, I think 2021 वाली data है. And then once again, कहाँ पे लोग ज़्यादा रह रहे थे और कहाँ से सबसे ज़्यादा लोग impact हुए because of the floods, and just overlay that on, create an intersection and come up with some numbers. So these are the numbers which indicate, I will take this with a pinch of salt because perhaps proportions might be a better estimate, कि यहाँ पे about, I think this would be about 30% of the population that was impacted because of these floods. Similarly, the road lengths as well. So this was the quantitative evaluation. Okay, so I think this was my last slide. I know people might have objections to these numbers themselves because of issues with satellite imagery, but we can have a discussion on that as well. Right.